Tatiana Hotere, welcome to Grey Areas. It's such a delight to have you on the show. And I've known you for years now, and in different ways, as a person who's worn many hats, as a writer and an actor and a mother and a friend. So what brings us here today is a discussion that is a meta discussion. It's a discussion about life and death. They are the thing that holds all of it together. And so I really would love to hear your story about grief, about death, and about the journey that you have taken after losing your husband so suddenly a few years ago now.
Well, it is a big journey. So Jason, my husband Jason Hotere, is Maori from Aotearoa, and he was a missionary with YWAM. We met through working together in Brazil, where I'm originally from. And it was very quick. Jason's like, I'm going to be your husband. And I'm like, I don't think so. I am never going to get married. And through working together, 9 months later, we got married. Not because of anything. It just was the time frame. We got married. We lived in the States. We were working with this Christian organization there. And then after 4 years living there, we had a baby. We moved to New Zealand. We were going to be here for just 2 years because of work. When we were here, my father-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer. So we decided to stay longer, for as long as he was with us. And we had another baby, so 2 daughters. And after my father-in-law passed away, we thought it would be really good for us and for my mother-in-law for us to be close to at least one set of family, because we would not be living in Brazil close to my family. And so we decided to stay here for some time. And I think it was a really great decision. Like, my kids grew up here. They are half Brazilian, half Maori. And life had its challenges and its beautiful moments. And Jason and I stepped away from ministry. I became more and more involved with arts, which I have been my whole life, but I trained as a professional actor. And then after that, I started working in screen and theater. And then at one point, I decided to do a master's in creative writing so I could write my own content. And it was around that time when I was just finishing my master's. Well, I had finished my master's. I was actually pitching my screenplay, my feature film, and Jason one day went to work and did not come back. So by then, our kids were 15 and 12. And it was a really, terrifying time in my life, because yes, I am very connected to my Maori whānau, but when grief strikes and is so sudden, I think, for me at least, all I wanted was to be surrounded by the things that were familiar to me from my roots, which was my culture, my people, and I couldn't have that. And what I found really disturbing about all of that experience when Jason died so suddenly was also the fact that I had a lot of other kinds of griefs that I somehow thought they had been resolved, but all of a sudden this volcano of grief started spilling out of me, and I felt really discombobulated. So Jason's death was the beginning of an unraveling of a lot of other things that came up to the surface for me. And that I was not prepared for. None of it I was prepared for.
It's so interesting to hear you even recognize that 6 years in to your grief process, to your journey with grief, that activated a whole other trajectory of mahi, of work, of discovery, learning. Like, to lose somebody you love, your life partner, suddenly on a dime. Friends of my parents have just heard that a 53-year-old man died of a heart attack. The daughter went to get him for dinner and he was dead. And so this happens. It's not very common, but it happens that we lose people what seems to be very definitely before their time, suddenly. I mean, you cannot prepare for that, can you? There's no script.
No, and you know what? I have a very vivid imagination. Like my whole life, I imagine things, and I like really feel them. I don't know. As an actor, I get a bit weird. I have conversations in my mind and arguments with people. Of course, I always win. But there were like I remember when my kids were babies, and I was like, are they breathing? And I was just kind of like hovering over them. I didn't want anything bad to happen to them, and I heard Brene Brown talking about this, that when you have this beautiful moment, you see your baby sleeping and they look like an angel, and then your mind kind of puts you in that place. What if this child gets hurt or passes away? And you kind of, as a mom, like I could relate to that when I was hearing her saying that, because I had those moments. And weirdly enough, I think I'm not the only one that imagines worst case scenarios to be prepared for it. But there has nothing like the reality to show you that there's no amount of imagination or preparation, that you cannot be prepared for when death comes. Emotionally speaking, that's what I think. I think that when death comes, especially when it's so suddenly, and I don't want to diminish the journey of people that know that they are dying, and the journey of the people that are caring for them, knowing that that time is coming, that we've been through that with my father-in-law. It's a really difficult journey because you are losing that person every day and you're feeling like you're living on the edge. You never know when that's actually going to finally happen. So that's another different kind of struggle. But the sudden death is something that there is no preparation for. And it really, for me, it threw me into this whirlwind and I couldn't quite find my feet. And the things that I thought were certain in my life, for example, my faith, became extremely shaky. And I started questioning everything. I questioned my relationship with God. I questioned my friendships. I questioned the choices that I had made as a wife. I questioned I don't know, I just questioned everything, and there was no answers and there was no fixing. And being in the middle of all of that, you feel so untethered, and it's really, really hard to find your ground and to find an anchor. That's the hardest thing about this kind of experience of sudden death, is just you do not know your direction anymore. And you don't even know if you have the strength to take a next step if you did find the direction.
And let's add to that the context that our society is so disconnected from death. We are so removed from the life-death cycle, I guess because we are removed from farming and planting and composting and gardening, many people. And we are removed from that process of dying because we don't live as communally. And pain is seen as this terrible thing, and death is seen as kind of the ultimate failure, if you like. It is very problematic, isn't it? Because what I hear when you are talking about grief is not just this, it's not acute pain. It's not something that happens, it's acute, you get it fixed. It's a chronic situation. Yeah. It's an ongoing situation. And when I hear you say, there are no answers, there is no fixing it, that resonates. I think that feels true. And yet here you are 6 years later carrying on, and I know you are creating and living and caring for others. So it's like these things are happening side by side.
Yeah, because life and death happen side by side, like they are the two sides of the same coin. You can't separate them. It's the same as love and grief. You cannot love somebody and expect to never grieve them. Like we grieve the end of a relationship because you grow apart or you decide to not be together anymore. You grieve when there's a death of a friendship. You grieve when there's a death of a pet. Yeah. You grieve when you actually have to move away, because I had to do that. And your friends and your family are still alive and connected to you through social media, but you don't get to see them every day. You don't get to hug them, look them in the eye. And so there's all those kinds of griefs that we have. But you're right, this whole thing of death being separated from life, I think in Western cultures, we have sanitized the idea of death in a similar way that we have sanitized Christianity. And it's just like, if you think about how the early church was so communal and they were so integrated and they were sharing each other's sufferings, we don't want to share each other's sufferings anymore. We want to pray and allow God to deal with it. We want to separate ourselves. We want to give our money to some charities, but then we don't actually want to follow up and see the struggles that those people that we are supporting are actually going through. We want to receive the letter, about what they are doing. That's great, but we don't want to really be in that journey with them. And I think what death did for me was to snap me out of that sanitation and that humanization of death and go, this is actually what life is. It's messy and it's sometimes gut-wrenching, and sometimes you can have all the stages of grief. You can have all of them in 1 hour, and they are not just this chronological, cookie cutter experience. It's messy. It will require attention. It will require your intention to be in it, knowing that's gonna hurt so bad, and yet you're gonna come up for air. And then another wave is going to hit, and then you're going to come up for air. And at one point, you feel like, when is this ever going to end? And the answer is, it doesn't. You just get better at being in it and carrying it.
Do you build stamina? Do you build muscle? What is it? When you say it gets better, unpack that for me.
I think you get resilient if you decide that you are going to face it.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask, as somebody who's living in New Zealand, has spent many years here, who's married to a Māori, who comes from Brazil, when you were facing your grief, did you draw from, was there anything in your whakapapa, your Brazilian culture that was of support or assistance?
One of the things that I found was that in Western culture, we are removed from the messiness of death. And by removing ourselves from that, we do ourselves a disfavor, because we remove ourselves from this cycle of life. Death is very much part of life. You can't have one without the other.
Was there any culture that you found that gave you more expression for grief, or that was a softer landing place?
Well, I think that I'm so grateful that my husband was Māori and he had a tangi. So, for the 3 days of the tangi, like, I've been to different tangis before. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law, other people in our whānau. And sitting there with the body, receiving visitors that come, and it was this cycle, right? So people arrive, there's the protocol, there is the crying, there's the wailing, there's the stories about the deceased, there is the kai, and then we start all over again. So going through that kind of cyclical motion was something that was really helpful for me, because you can't just sit there and cry for 3 days straight, right? And so the songs and the laughter, and then the wailing, and then the kai, and then the sleep, and then press repeat. I think that was extremely helpful for me. It was a very, it was a very healing process at the hardest time of my life. But then the tangi ends and everybody goes home. And then you need to face your life. You go to your workplace and you meet your friends and you go to your family gatherings, and there's Christmas and there's all the significant dates and the anniversary and the first everything.
Yep.
And people give you some kind of grace for that first year, because they kind of understand, the first year is hard. But then after the first year, the grace evaporates. And then being someone who comes from a culture that is very expressive, being an artist also.
It was a perfect storm.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And there's no real answers for that.
Yeah.
My only thing was that I think because I'm really stubborn, I just thought, you know what? I'm going to do this my way. I don't know what way this is. I'm building this bicycle as I ride it. And nobody's going to tell me how to ride this because it is my shit road. And I'm the only one that has to be on this road, right? So I'm going to do it my way. And if you're not happy with it, whatever. Yeah, that. So I think that indigenous cultures do have a more holistic approach to death. They do have a more integrated way of expressing grief and embracing death and embracing the process of the grieving process transforms you. You cannot help. Grief is going to transform you. What you can do is to, again, be intentional about the direction of that transformation. And some people might need some help. I had a lot of help from great friends and a grief coach and a therapist and a yoga teacher. But we all need guidance and help. But ultimately, it is your life, it is your grief, it is your journey. You have to take ownership of it. One of the gifts that I feel like I've received through my grief is resilience. And if somebody had said that to me in the early stages of my grief, I would slap them over the face. I would be like, don't talk to me. I want my husband back. I don't want to be resilient. I don't want wisdom. I just want my husband back. However, that was not a choice. What death has given me through, and the grief has provided for me, was the opportunity to choose. Every single day, the grief was there, and it was like a ton of this weight on me. I had a choice every day. Do I let this weight crush me? And if it does, who do I call out as my tribe to help me hold on to it? And I also have the choice of going, okay, how do I then learn to carry this weight? Because people would say to me, you have to move on. Jason would want you to be happy. There's no moving on from grief. What I learned is you can move with grief. You can learn to carry this grief with you. Every single day you face it. It's there. Grief is kind of like the dust that covers every corner of your life. And you clean the dust, and then an hour later it will be covered with dust again. You can resent that, which I did, but you can also go, where is the strength that I need to clean this up again and again and again and again? So resilience is one of the things that grief can provide for you. But your choice matters, because I think that there are so many times that we feel disempowered because we feel like we have no choice. And in death, it's like that. The choice was taken away from you. This person died. Doesn't matter how they died. They died. And you are left, right? So where are you? And that was a question I ask myself every day. Okay, Jason died. Where am I? Because I did not die with him, even though there were many times that I wish I did. But I was here, and I had 2 kids to look after. I felt like a lost little girl with 2 little girls to look after. And so every single day I had to make a choice. What am I going to do with my grief today? And honestly, Petra, there were days that I was just like, I can only cope with the next 5 minutes. What am I going to do? I'm going to get up and I'm going to wash my face. I'm going to walk my dog. I'm going to make a cup of coffee. I'm going to load the dishwasher. I'm going to get to work. I'm going to lock myself in the bathroom at work and cry. It was the next 5 to 10 minutes because I could not think about the whole day, let alone my whole life without Jason. But what happened was all the little 5 minutes of choosing to move towards life, they compounded. And then a year passed, and it was a year of little 5 minutes. And I went, oh, wow, I survived the first year. Maybe I can survive the second year. And then as I started to notice I am surviving, I'm okay with surviving, I'm okay with not being okay, then the next question was, can I thrive in the middle of this grief? Still carrying it with me? Not moving on from it, but moving with it? And the answer is yes. And I don't think I could have learned that from anybody else, from reading any book, from listening to a podcast. I only learned that by doing my tiny little 5 minutes of resilience, which felt like such tiny little moments of resilience. They don't count, compounded they do. And I think that if I would have an advice, which I don't usually give advice for people that are grieving, but I would say, take a breath. What can you do in the next 5 to 10 minutes? Do that.
Yeah.
And presence, I think that was another gift that I received with grief, because it was hurting so bad that I had to be present with my grief. I know that that's not the choice that everybody makes, and I think that people cope however they need to cope. But I was very aware that if I didn't find healthy ways to cope with my grief, my children would suffer, because they only had one parent, and I was constantly worried that my kids would end up losing two parents just in different ways, because you can be physically present but emotionally and mentally checked out. And I thought, I need to be able to find a way to carry this grief well, because my children are looking at me, because they lost a father. And so I need to somehow figure out, how do I grieve in a way that is authentic, so that my girls are not going to try to sanitize their grief, so that when they go through other things in life that will break their heart, they will be able to go, you know what, I actually went through something really hard when I lost my dad, and I saw my mom falling apart, and I saw her picking herself up, not denying that the pain was there, very much being like I think I became the woman that was just like, you know what, if it's gonna burn, let it burn. Like, just set this whole thing on fire, and then we're gonna rebuild this as a phoenix. I don't know. But I wanted my children to know that. And so making that choice for me was the least selfish choice, which was, I could very well become an alcoholic. And I don't say this with any judgment. I say this because I never really was a person that would drink much, but I remember I was in so much pain and the alcohol would numb me. And I caught myself after literally 5 nights of drinking a bottle by myself every night. I thought, what am I doing? What am I doing? Is this what I need? Is this what I want? And having to choose to allow the pain to be a part of my experience was a really tough choice, because grief makes you feel so alone. And of course, going into becoming an workaholic, an alcoholic, a sex addict, whatever it is that you need to feel alive again or to numb that pain, it's really part of that human desire to not hurt anymore. And yet, it is only through going through the pain that you can discover that you can survive the pain and eventually come to thrive, not in spite of the pain, but because of the pain.
When I hear you, I feel it, the desire to get away from the pain. When I feel immensely overwhelmed with powerful emotions of anger or sadness, when I feel like you almost feel like you're falling. It feels like falling into kind of a sadness that doesn't have edges, so you can't just pull yourself out. It's just like this sort of falling. And I know at the same time that we need relief, we need respite. And so there are moments when something can just bring you a moment of relief and respite from all of the feelings. What was that for you?
For me, I know that a lot of people find a lot of solace in their religion. For me, God became a source of pain. And it's really interesting now that I have, almost 6 years later, I'm in a very different place in my spirituality. I know without a shadow of doubt that God is closer to me than the air that I breathe. There is nothing that can separate me from His love and His presence. I am in Him and He's in me. But it's been a really long journey through wilderness to get to this place. And I just want to acknowledge people that go through a major loss in their life. And one of the things that they also lose is their faith. Because people would say to me, lean on Jesus, or listen to worship songs that will give you those moments of respite. I couldn't. I literally couldn't. It was like I couldn't swallow one more sermon, one more Bible verse. If somebody would say to me, rejoice because Jason is with God in heaven, oh, I became like a pirate. My mouth was just like swearing words were, coming out like water. And it was just, I was scaring myself. So I had to find little pockets of joy. I think this is what kind of like I needed to find. And this comes from my friend John Kelly. He also had some really big losses in his life. And he and his wife Judy one day said to me, darling, you need to find the little pockets of happiness. And for me, it became about the present moment. I can see the birds. They are just perching over there and they are singing. 6 o'clock in the morning, I will be with the birds. I know it sounds cliche and I know it sounds silly, but that was what helped me survive. Like, I'm paying attention to nature. I would go for a walk and start noticing the trees and how the wind would shift them and how they dance in different ways. I would take a moment to really look into my child's eyes when they were talking to me and try to be present, even though there was a million things in my mind. I would cuddle my dog. I would call a friend and say, can you please tell me something good about me? Because I forgot. I forgot what is good about me. And so just hearing my friend saying, I love you because you are this and this and this, and you bring this kind of things into my life. And I would sit there, and my inner critic was like, no, I'm a terrible person. You don't know the thoughts that go through my mind. I want to end my life. I don't believe in God anymore. I swear like a trooper. I want drink every night so I can go to sleep because I can't sleep. I was like, my judge was so intense, my inner judge, that to sit there and listen to a friend saying good things about me, I had to choose to believe I was a good person. Because another thing that happened was, I used to think initially, Jason was the better person. All I wanted to be is, I want to be an actor. I want to be on stage and say to me, oh, look at me, look at me. And Jason was out there. He was a counselor. He was changing people's lives. There were so many parents that said to me in his funeral, your husband saved my son's life. So here I am, like losing it and feeling like there's nothing good about me. I should be the one that died. And then I would hear my friends, I had to ask them, can you tell me something good? I'm going to believe you because I know you wouldn't say a lie to me. And those became my little pockets of joy that I collected, like tiny little, grains of sand. But again, those things compound. And it was like having those things in my life, listening to a song, dancing by myself until I cried, crying on the floor of the bathroom, and then looking myself in the mirror and go, it's okay, you survived another wave. It's okay, you're going to be fine. Those things helped me. And I know, oh my God, I feel like I'm sounding really depressing.
No, you aren't. No, honestly, when you talk about pockets of happiness and you say it sounds so cliche, the thing that brings my hope up and the thing that makes me feel so encouraged is the attainableness of your pockets of joy, that you can see a bird singing, that you can see the wind moving the trees, that you can see yourself in the mirror after another weeping session, that you could dance on your own, that you could call a friend. These are all actions that we can take. They're not cost prohibitive. They're not time prohibitive. Does that make sense? They're literally things that of XYZ out there, it's actually these tiny actions we take to collect joy or to release grief or to be with our grief.
Yeah. And something else that really helped me, and hopefully this might help some other people as well, writing.
Yeah.
I wrote like pen and paper, and I just wrote stream of consciousness, and honestly, some days it was just like the F word for a whole page, and some days was all my desires. Some days it was all the things that I wish I had told Jason that I didn't get the chance to. Some days it was like just really this sadness about the life that I would never get to have, because that's another thing. When somebody dies, you're not just burying the person that you love, you're burying the future that you're supposed to have with that person, your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, your plans, everything. Like your life as it was, it's no longer, and yet life keeps on going. I remember going to places, going to the supermarket, seeing people laughing, and I'm like, how dare you, my husband's dead. And so I would come home and I would write. I wrote a lot. And so writing was also something that was part of that healing for me. And I wouldn't read what I wrote. I just kind of, it was like throwing up on the page. But after about a couple of years, I revisit some of those journals, and then I could see, wow, I'm not there anymore. But I have so much compassion for that woman that lost her husband at 42, and she felt so lost, and she felt so disenfranchised. I'm not that woman anymore, but that woman is always going to be a part of me, because that woman survived. Today I can thrive. Looking back into those journals, looking back into cards that friends send me, looking back into memories on Facebook. So those things also compound. And this thing that we talked about in the beginning, like, every end is a beginning. So with every journal that I closed, because I filled all the pages, was a new beginning for a new chapter, a new journey, a new stage of my journey with grief. I think sometimes we want to heal all at once.
Of course we do. Of course we do.
Yeah, and sometimes we want to bounce back, but there's no bouncing back. However, there is forging a new path forward. And it might not be the path that you would have chosen, but it's the path that you can create. And for me, I was very aware of at a certain point, and I think for me it was around the mark of 3 years, when I thought, I get to live. Jason didn't get that chance. What am I going to do with the life that I have now? Even though it wasn't the life that I wanted, it's the life that I have. How do I honor his life by living my best life today? And that was when I started going back into my creativity as a way to process my grief, but also as a way to rewrite my own
I know
story
it's
from now
really
on.
different.
But I think I could only get to that life because I gave myself permission to grieve. And this is what I say all the time. So when I wrote my play, initially it really was a cathartic experience for me. But then I thought, well, there's some things about grief that I want to explore more in this play. And I decided to then change the play, which really I wrote it for me. And my intention for that play was I want to give people permission to grieve. I know it sounds weird because, who am I to give people permission to grieve? But I gave that to myself. And we can only give to others what we have.
I agree.
That was my intention. Yeah, you cannot give what you don't have.
You can't give away what you don't have. I agree. Yep.
Yeah. And so I thought, I'm giving myself permission to grieve every single day. I'm not sanitizing it. I am not numbing it. I am not pushing it aside. I am with it. So I don't have, perhaps I don't have a lot to offer. What I do have to offer is my story, and here is who I am. And hopefully through this play, this is what I was thinking, right? Somebody will say, me too. I feel seen. I feel heard. I feel validated. Because I needed that when I was going through my grief all on my own. Grief is such a lonely experience. Such a lonely experience. And often so many people around you, they want to help, but they don't know how. And so I had to give myself a lot of permissions. I had to give myself permission to be alone and lonely in this grief without feeling like I was a loser, that something was wrong with me. I had to give myself permission to distance myself from certain friendships, not because they were bad people, but because they were not the right people for this part of my journey. And then I had to give myself permission to figure out what is it that I want to do with this life that I have. And in the middle of giving myself all those tiny little permissions every single day, again, they compound, right? I wrote a play that my intention for it was I want to give people permission to then go and grieve their own way. Because there were so many times people wanted me to grieve in a certain way. And that is something that, can we talk a little bit about that? Because that's my pet peeve. Okay, so some people feel really uncomfortable with grief. Most of us do, right?
Yep.
I used to feel really uncomfortable with grief. People kind of like, I don't know, parts of their brain apparently light up when somebody's in distress and they feel it too. And so they want to just fix it. Please stop crying so I can be okay. So a lot of people would say to me a lot of things that were very unhelpful because they wanted me to be okay because they wanted to be okay. And I remember saying to people, I am not okay. And if you are not okay with that, there's the door. You do not need to be here because I need to protect my grief. My grief was the only thing that I felt like was still holding me to my husband. It was sacred to me. So when people would come to me and give me a whole lot of unsolicited advice and empty platitudes and a whole lot of Bible verses, I became the person that was just really challenging them on that. Somebody said to me once in church, you know, God really needed a strong man in heaven, and so that's probably why he took Jason so early. I know.
No.
I know. Somebody else said to me, Job lost more than you, but he really... Yeah, Job lost more than you, but he rejoiced in the Lord and he praised the Lord, and then the Lord gave him more than what he had before. God's going to give you another husband, but you got to fix your attitude. So, this whole thing of people wanting you to be okay is definitely not okay. And so I'm not going to share some of the answers that I gave to those people because they're very colorful answers and they are not very Christian answers. But in a nutshell, I just told everybody to...
fuck off.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sorry, I shouldn't put words in your mouth.
No, it was that. And I would say, I remember saying to somebody, you know, the day you bury your husband, then you come and talk to me. I remember saying to another friend, it's really interesting you're saying all of this to me because you are leaving my home and then you're going to go and lay down beside your husband. I'm going to lay down in an empty bed tonight. So you do not know what I'm going through. And people believe that they knew what I was going through because I think in some ways we can imagine and we feel like, oh, I know what you're going through because I lost my pet, because I lost my grandma, because I lost my friend. And every loss is very valid. But although grief is universal, every loss is very unique. Nobody apart from me knows what it was like to lose Jason Hotere as my husband because nobody else was married to him. And so this whole thing about people saying things that are well-intentioned but really dumb really need to stop. Because if you don't know what to say, either show up, but don't say things that you feel like tough love doesn't work. And Bible verses out of context doesn't work. It when
and
a
making
person
it
is
better,
hurting,
making it better doesn't work.
making it better doesn't work. Trying to fix it doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
And so I think that it's just this thing of like, can you be present with somebody that's grieving without fixing it, without trying to snap them out of it? If you can't, then perhaps the most compassionate thing for you to do is to stay away. Figure out what you can do and offer that. And if they say yes, great. And if they say no, don't feel offended. Because when you're in the middle of a tornado, there's nothing really that we can say that's going to make it better. Sometimes we can show up and say, hey, this is my offering to you. I can do this for you, and be really specific about that. But if you cannot do nothing, and if you feel really triggered, then don't show up, because odds are, if you show up with the intention of fixing them so that you can feel better, you're just going to make them feel worse.
And I think so often we don't realize the underlying motivation. So you show up thinking you're going to help them feel better, but we aren't necessarily aware that we are uncomfortable with these big emotions, and we would like that person to feel better so that we can feel better, or so that we can feel a sense of achievement, or so that we can think we've helped, or so that we've done the right thing, and we don't necessarily know our own capacity for sitting with someone else's grief. So it's quite a journey, I have to come home to my own feelings and begin the journey of comfort and discomfort with my own feelings before I can sit with somebody else and their feelings. So in that case, I might be better to drop a meal at the front door.
Yeah.
Or to take the child to the pool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Back to this practical thing. So I have a friend, this beautiful couple. They own this lawn mowing business. He comes to my house every fortnight. It's going to be 6 years, Petra. He comes to my house every fortnight and does my lawns. And I just feel like every time they show up, I'm reminded God has not left me. Sometimes I'm not even here, you know. They have a key to the yard and they come in and do the lawns, and I arrived late, and sometimes in a day that I just feel like, oh my God, another day that I don't know how to do this. And then I see my very beautifully manicured lawns, and I go, oh, there is a God in heaven that is looking after me. I have another friend that for, about a year showed up every Sunday to take my kids to the movies or shopping or whatever, so I could have some time. And it was just like, this is what I can do on this date for this amount of time. Would that help? And if that is what you can do, for as long as you can do, it doesn't need to be for 6 years. It can be, once, twice. Do that. Do it with all your heart. But make space, give people permission to be in their messy grief. Because if we don't, we rob them from experiencing what that suffering can bring forth in their lives. And when I say that, it's because grief crushes you. But I have learned that through the cracks, there was a light inside of me that could never have come out if it wasn't through the cracks of the pain and the grief and the suffering that I've been through. I was cracked open, and I thought I had nothing to give. And yet today, I know that I have a purpose in my life, and my grief has helped me to come to that. So when we try to fix things, or when we try to push people into being well really quickly, we are somehow blocking them from going through that experience of grief, that when we support them in it, they can find new parts of themselves that only that suffering can bring to the surface. And I'm not advocating for suffering here. I'm not. I want to be in the Bahamas sipping, coconut water and margaritas. I love a great life. Yeah. But at the same time, I also know my best work creatively, my most incredible insights about myself, my self-love, My desire for life and authenticity have not come because of the great moments in my life. They all have come because I plunged into really difficult, dark moments. And I had people around me that were okay to be there as a watchguard and pull me back when I was going too far. We all need those people.
Yeah. I hear you saying, you know, those things happened to you. You didn't go out and seek darkness and suffering.
No.
When the darkness and suffering intersected with your life, as death does, then you walked with it and you faced it as best you could, and you did that not on your own entirely, but with the support of people who loved you, and you were willing to mine that for what was there. And that is, it's pretty profound. In fact, there are flowers behind you, and they are...
I know.
Yeah, tell me, there's so many flowers behind you. Tell me, why are there so many flowers behind you?
Oh, there were other flowers, so I did a play. It's called Skin Hunger.
Very nice top.
Wearing the shirt, you know.
Yeah.
So I wrote this play, and the play was very much based on my experience with grief and some of the things that nobody prepared me for, which all opened this Pandora's box in my life. Because when the person that you're most intimate with, physically, emotionally, spiritually connected to that person who is your husband, your wife, your life partner, when that person is no longer here, something that nobody ever told me is that you're really going to miss their body. You're really going to miss them lying beside you, touching you, hugging you. Skin hunger is a real thing. It's this need, I became touch-starved because nobody touched me. Apart from hugging my kids and hugging my friends, nobody intimately touched me for such a long time. And I started feeling like something was wrong with me, that I was convinced at one point that I had cancer. I had all sorts of weird, funky things happening with my body. And I'm like, what is this rash that I have all over my face? What is this aching that I feel on my bones? And so I start researching. And we go to Dr. Google, right? You can't help, but the doctors say don't, but we all do. We all do. And so thank God for Dr. Google, because I found that I have this thing. It's skin hunger. It's a psychological thing that condition, I don't want to say a condition, but it's a name the psychologists use to explain how we are all wired for touch, because our skin has thousands and thousands of neuroreceptors, right? And when we actually receive loving touch from people that we are emotionally connected with, that we feel safe with, we can calm down our nervous system. We can actually release oxytocin. That's why we put babies on our chests, you know, so we have contact on skin. One of the things that happen with elderly people is that they are starved for touch, so they start developing some physical and mental conditions that are really debilitating because they are never touched. And I thought, this is happening to me. So how am I going to deal with this? And I wrote a play, and I start asking my friends, please hug me more, you know, and I would be like holding my children's hand when I was walking and on the mall or whatever. And I started seeking ways to also touch my own body. So I got essential oils, and I would intentionally, again, that word, I would have a hot shower, cry in the shower until my eyes were so red. And then I would get my essential oils and rub it on my skin really slowly, smelling that. And I would hug myself. And I learned this through going through therapy, like that I would rock myself and go, shh. Yeah. I would tap my shoulder and go, shh, you're going to be okay. And I would, you know, I got a silk pajamas, and I, like everything that had to do with touch, I got one of those blankets that were a weighted blanket, because I felt so, I needed an anchor. I needed to come back to my body.
Connect, yeah. I was going to say, you feel disconnected. Can I say that self-soothing, that holding yourself, rocking, patting, hugging yourself, It is profound, and I think we would feel like, what? Like weird.
Yeah.
But actually, as a tool, as something even more, as a kindness, we can do this. We can take this action. I mean, I do it sometimes in my exercise practice. The yoga instructor will say, give yourself a hug, massage your foot. This is loving touch is something that we can, our own bodies, our own minds, our own hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wrote a play about skin hunger because I felt skin hunger and I needed to learn how to self-soothe and all of that. But also I started going on Tinder dates. They were terrible. They were so horrible. As a 40-something-year-old woman that was married for 20 years, Tinder is not your friend. And so I was like, oh no, my life is over. I will never be able to be with somebody again. Do I want to be with somebody again? All those questions, right? And all the very difficult things to deal with for me, which were how do I soothe myself, like my skin hunger? How do I connect intimately with another man who is not my husband? I don't want to get married again. I love my husband. As a Christian woman that was marinated in purity culture all my life, this is a really big no-no. OMG, am I a sinner? What is going on in my life? But I have this desire to be with somebody, to be touched. How do I do this? Wrote this play, and it's hilarious, but it's also heartbreaking and heartwarming, and it's full of hope and joy and sadness. And so I just had the second season. I finished last week at Q Theater. 2 sold-out seasons, independently made with no funding. Hopefully I can get some funding to tour it. And so the flowers are, from people that love me, that wanted to say, hey, came to your play. It was amazing. And I feel really appreciated, not only by my friends and family that came to support me, but by the wider theater community and the audience members that came to the show. I came every night from each performance. Like this side of my shoulder was always full of snot from people hugging me and crying on my shoulder and saying, thank you so much for writing this play. I relate so much to it. And the content of it made me feel like now I have permission to grieve. So yay, I actually kind of feel like I achieved some of the things that I aimed with the play.
It's amazing. It's profound.
It's pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
It's
pretty amazing. Yeah,
Then,
it's testament. It's testament to the work that you've done. It's testament to showing up with intention and attention. It's testament to being okay with not being okay. Not only have you made this play that would reach out and explore quite an unexplored aspect of intimate partner loss, skin hunger, but also you have produced your own podcast called Crazy Grief, where you explore your journey in more detail and more depth. And so I do want to shout out to that. Can I ask you, Tatiana, what would your 80-year-old self or your 85-year-old self say to your beautiful 48-year-old self? What do you think, looking back, she would say to you today?
I think she would say, I'm very proud of you. Oh, wow. Do you ask this question to everybody? Because that really got me. I'm going to go 88, my 88-year-old self, who is going to be good looking and healthy with all her teeth and sassy ass. So my very sassy, good looking 88-year-old self would look at me today and she would say, sweetheart, look at you. You took the things that came to crush you and you transformed them into pixie dust. And you were able to create a life that, even though was not the life you wanted, was a life that was better than you expected. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. Yeah.